to Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh, the holy city. It's so wonderful to be here, and it's so great to see so many locals enjoying the beautiful city that we have here. Everybody's wearing their masks. I'm going to take it off when I can, but I do have to wear it as we walk around the old city here. I want to thank our sponsor for this episode, Jerusalem Sunrise Cycling. If anybody wants to support the content that we're producing. So let's get started here. Before we even go into the old city, before we venture into the old city and talk about the history, let's talk about everything that you can see around. You know, it's like when people visit Israel, their focus is always on Jerusalem, and it should be. And when their focus is on Jerusalem, their focus is on the old city. And when it's on the old city, it's usually on the Jewish quarter. And if it's on the Jewish quarter, it's on the Kotel. We get this tunnel vision. And that's an unfortunate byproduct that sometimes we miss out on the beautiful modern city here in Jerusalem that we have, the great hotels, the great infrastructure, the playhouses, and the theaters, and the restaurants. But when did this all start? I want you all to realize that the first neighborhood that was built beyond the old city walls was only constructed in 1860. Now, why was this? Well, in the middle of the 19th century, you had the advent of the steam-powered engine, which allowed people to travel much quicker than before. Jews around the world in exile always yearned to return to Jerusalem, yearned to return to Jerusalem. But it just wasn't possible because it would take 6 months to traverse the European continent in order to arrive here in Western Asia, what Americans would call the Middle East, Western Asia, here into the lands of Israel, and 6 months to journey back. It was too much. That's not a vacation. You might as well move. And many Jews did move in order to return to their brothers and sisters who are always living here. But with the steam-powered engine, both on rail and with ships, allowed Jews to return much quicker. However, when they returned here, they thought to themselves, am I crazy? Can I ever leave this place? And they ripped up their return ticket home and they stayed here, and the population of Jerusalem exploded from, well, in the beginning of the 19th century, the population of Jerusalem, which was only the old city, was roughly about 1,200 people. By the middle of the 19th century, it doubles in size. You have 2,500 people who are living here. Unfortunately, the Turkish Empire, who was ruling this area, did nothing to improve the quality of life for the residents of Jerusalem. And the cisterns in which collected the waters began to crack, and sewage that was in the streets began to seep into those cisterns, and people started to become sick. People's children, unfortunately, were dying. And epidemics spread through the old city of Jerusalem. And people cried out to Hashem, people cried out to God to send a Moses-like figure to lead an exodus to greener pastures. And, well, call out and you shall receive, not Moses from Mount Sinai. You guys would have heard this story. But Hashem, God sent another Moses, Moses Montefiore, a very, very wealthy English individual whose wife's sister married into the Rothschild family, became extremely wealthy, and by the age of 40, he retires and spends the next 61 years of his life. He lives to 101 doing philanthropic work around the Jewish world, but paid extra focus and attention right here into Jerusalem, and he'll build the first neighborhood outside of Jerusalem, just across the valley over there, a place called Mishkanot Shananim. And he builds a windmill in order that the residents can have their own industry and produce grain and to sell it and to become self-sufficient. Because Moses Montefiore realized that if this dream of the Jewish people returning back to the land of Israel once and for all, the only way we would be able to succeed at that is if we become self-sufficient, and he builds an industry for us. The neighborhood takes off, it blossoms. A second neighborhood is built already in 1868. By 1878, you have the most famous of all the early neighborhoods, Meir Sharim, that is going to be built. And by the turn of the century, in the beginning of the 1900s, you have more people living outside the old city walls than you have living inside the city walls. Remember, in the beginning of the 1800s, the 19th century, There's only 1,200 people living here in Jerusalem in the old city. We have not expanded these walls. Since these walls were built, we have not expanded them. Today, you have roughly about 38,000 people who live inside the old city. Now, speaking of the walls, as we begin to approach the old city, speaking of the walls, we know that King David will establish Jerusalem not only as our eternal spiritual capital, but it will become our physical capital, the center of all 12 tribes. That takes place roughly 1000 BCE, 3,000 years ago. So if Jerusalem was established as our physical capital to go in line with our spiritual capital 3,000 years ago, how old are the old city walls today? Well, let's play the little Price is Right, right? Everybody at home right now, think about that. How old are the old city walls, right? I know some of you are saying, well, it must be 3,000 years old since the days of King David. Some people are saying, no, the walls were destroyed during the Roman conquest of Jerusalem. So maybe they're only 2,000 years old. So the old city walls that we have today are only roughly about 500 years old, relatively young when you think about Jerusalem, because Jerusalem is an ancient city. It's about 500 years old. It was built by Suleiman the Magnificent, the greatest, what do we call great, right? Definitely the most famous of the Turkish emperors, the Sultan. They called it the Sultan of the Turkish Ottoman Empire. And he'll build it in 1535. You can see an inscription above Jaffa Gate, the most well-known gate here in the Old City. And that is because most of the people arriving into Eretz Israel from the west arrived from the port of Jaffa, and they would take horse and buggy, eventually train, and will move to automobiles and buses a lot later. But they will enter Jerusalem from Jaffa to Jaffa Gate. So let's go on into the Old City. We have roughly about an hour and a half, and I do want to take you all around the Old City. I'm just going to point out the really cool mezuzah over here. In Judaism, we always look for a spark of light within the darkest of places. And what Israel did, the municipality, when we liberated the old city, was to take all of the bullet shells, all the bullets that were in the wall, we took them out, we extracted them, we melted them down, and we made mezuzahs for the gates of Yerushalayim. Every morning and every night, we recite the Shema. And in the Shema, it says that not only on the doorpost of your home, but in the gates of your city, you shall place a mezuzah. Well, I think this might be the only city in the world that has walls around it and a gate into it that has a mezuzah on it. Very, very special. Yalla, let's go into the old city. It's really wonderful to be here and to see it's so busy. I was here just a few weeks ago giving a virtual tour for an organization called Project Inspire, and the streets were just completely empty. But right now, it is the end of the summer season here in Israel, and all the kids are home now from camp. School starts up again in 2 weeks, and so all the family, many families, I should say, take the time to visit places here in Israel, to the national parks, and of course, to our holy city, to Jerusalem. So come on over here. You can see this big, large wall over on the right-hand side over here. This is part of the citadel, the stronghold of Jerusalem for almost 2,000 years. But it was originally built by King Herod, okay? Some people call him Herod the Great. Here in Israel, oftentimes we call him Herod the Horrible, because King Herod was a great builder and he left his mark throughout Israel. He built places like Caesarea, he built Masada, many, many different projects that King Herod had built. This was his palace, and he had 3 towers in order to protect it. Only one of them has survived, and this is the tower that you can see right over here. This is still the original 2,000-year-old tower, and if you take a look at the stones, anybody who's familiar, who's been to Jerusalem and has been to the Western Wall, so these stones are carved out in the exact same fashion as the ones that you'll see in the old city. So very, very exciting to be here. As you walk into Jaffa Gate, you immediately see that the old city is divided into quarters, right? These aren't quarters like 25%, 25%, 25. These are just living quarters for 4 different groups of people. And anybody who joined me for the Tisha B'Av tour, you know that we walked straight this way and we made a left-hand turn down a street known as St. James through the Armenian Quarter. This is the Armenian Quarter straight ahead. What we're gonna do now is we're actually gonna go through an alleyway, and I'm gonna take you up to the rooftops of the old city where you get to see all 4 quarters sound out. All right, we're back on. I want you in front of me because here we go. We're back on. It's funny, I put the do not disturb on my phone, but calls still can come in through WhatsApp. So, hey, Phil, can you just turn around? Thanks. So as we're walking through this alleyway, you can see this is a residential section. This is not part of the Jewish quarter. This is a mixed population, Christian Arabs, Muslim Arabs, and Armenians. Sort of where all, or those 3 quarters kind of come together. And you'll notice as we make this turn, there's a mosque over here. And also we are going to, you see the sign right there? The Al-Yaqubi Mosque. And then the name of the street is Maronite Convent Street. The Maronites are the official Christian denomination of Lebanon. And taking into consideration the explosion that just happened in Beirut, our thoughts and our prayers go out to the those that have been harmed by that explosion, and hopefully they'll be able to rebuild in a peaceful way with us here in Israel, please God. So let's continue. I'm gonna let Phil just, you can put the camera forward if you want. And I want to talk a little bit about why Jerusalem. I'm going to take my mask off here because people aren't going to walk down this part of the old city. Yep. And so I want to talk a little bit about why Jerusalem. Why did King David come here in the first place? Well, now just think about for a moment, what do you need in order to establish a city, right? What does one need even today to establish a city? There's 3 things that you must have in order to have a successful city, whether it was in ancient times 3,000 years ago or whether it was today. You need 3 things. What are those 3 things? Well, first of all, you need to be able to, first and foremost, you need water, right? You need to be around a living source of water. Now, in Jerusalem, there's only one source of water, and that's the Gihon Spring, right? The Gihon Spring. Not a lot of water is coming out from there. So already you think to yourself, why Jerusalem? Second is you need to be able to defend yourself. Well, in ancient times, that meant establishing your city on a high point, right? The higher you are, the easier it is to defend your city. Well, here in Israel, or here in Jerusalem, but rather all the hills that surround Jerusalem, but rather all the hills that surround Jerusalem are higher than the hill that Jerusalem is built on. So it does where we're gonna. It's very difficult in these alleyways because there's a lot of stone and the internet isn't the best. So we're going to go up to the rooftop and I'll explain a little bit more about why Jerusalem. Why was Jerusalem settled in the first place, right? Three things that you need. You need to have water. Jerusalem does not have a lot of water. It only has one spring in Jerusalem, known as the Gihon Spring. Two, you need to be able to defend yourself. You need to be on a high place, a high location. Jerusalem is not on the highest mountain, right? Today, Israel has such a successful and powerful army because we have a great air force. We control the skies in this area. And third is you need to be able to make money. You need to have commerce. Jerusalem is not built on an ancient highway. For those of you who joined me on the Gush Etzion ATV tour, we took the path of the patriarchs, an ancient road. There's no ancient roads that really travel through Jerusalem because of all the mountains in this area. You're going to want to take the valleys. You're going to want to take the easy places. The only reason why Jerusalem was settled by King David and the Israelites 3,000 years ago is because this is the most spiritual place in the world, right? You have the Big Bang. Well, this is the spiritual Big Bang that takes place every second. This is the place that everything metaphysical, everything spiritual, everything infinite, everything beyond the scope of our understanding, because we are only finite beings. Everything beyond that, which we call God, which we call Hashem, this is where all of that energy comes down and then spreads out and creates this physical world that we live in. And we believe that that took place on the Temple Mount, right? Which is where the Dome of the Rock is today, which in just a moment, as we get to the highest point here in the Old City, we will get a magnificent view of the Dome of the Rock. So come on up here. You know, this is such a peaceful place here in the Old City. And I studied in a yeshiva here in the Old City for a number of years. And I remember in the evening, oftentimes we would come here with a hookah, with a nargila, and a guitar, and a bottle of wine, and we would sing songs, and we would hang out. And you'd also have Armenians from the Armenian quarter who would come and hang out on this peaceful rooftop, watching the sunset. You'd have Christians from the Christian quarter coming out, Muslims from the Arab quarter coming out. And everybody was here in a very, very peaceful, cohesive way. In fact, you can see some people hanging out on the rooftop even right now, enjoying what we're enjoying, which is this incredible view to the west, okay? And from here, you can see the Dome of the Rock with the beautiful golden dome, built on the exact location where the first and second temple stood, and of course, where we want the third temple to be rebuilt. Now, the Dome of the Rock is the oldest piece of Muslim architecture. Jerusalem was conquered by the Muslims in 638 CE, okay? Muhammad, right, the father of Islam, is only preaching this new faith between 622 and his death in 632, only 10 years. But immediately afterwards, you have a great schism, right? The Shiite-Sunni schism. And you're going to start to have different Muslim sects begin to fight one another. You have the controlling parties on the holy places in Mecca and Medina. And then you have the Umayyads who conquered this area of Israel from the Byzantine Empire, right? The Byzantine Empire from Constantinople. And they will turn Jerusalem into a holy city as well. How do they do that? They take a story from the oral traditions of Islam known as the Hadith. And in the Hadith, it speaks of the night journey where Muhammad has a dream. And in his dream, he's woken up by the archangel Gabriel, who takes him out. And there's this mythical beast. It's like a horse with wings and a face of a woman. And this magical beast his name was Al-Barak, and takes him to the furthest mosque, in Arabic, the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And from there, he will ascend into heaven for 40 days, where he will receive the teachings of the Quran, and he'll wake up from his dream and he'll begin to write all the teachings that he received in this dream. They believe that where that ascension took place is exactly where the temple stood. And how long was he up in heaven with Allah, with God? It was up there for 40 days, just like Moses on Mount Sinai, right? For Christians out there, Jesus was tempted in the desert for how many days? For 40 days. How many years were the Israelites wandering in the desert? 40. We can see how 40 is a very, very powerful, common, popular number in Judaism, Islam, and in Christianity. On Wednesday night, we celebrate a new month in Judaism, a new month here in Israel called Elul. From Rosh Chodesh, from the first day of Elul until Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, how many days? You got it, 40 days, because this idea of 40 has an element of purification in it. Now, speaking of ascension, if you look all the way across on the horizon, you can see a number of towers. I'm not too sure you'll be able to make it out. I'm going to send you guys a link to a video, and I'll have pictures in the video, a little close-ups of what we're looking at. But you have a small tower to the right-hand side. That is, or a large tower really right in the middle, that is the Church of Ascension, right? The Russian Church of Ascension, where Christians believe that Jesus leapt up to heaven after his resurrection. A little bit to the left, you have a hospice that was built in the 19th century called the Augusta Victoria Hospice. And a little bit further, all the way over there, you have Hebrew University, which is in the neighborhood of French Hill, which is where I used to live before I moved out to Gush Etzion. Now, up here on this rooftop, we are exactly where all four quarters meet. Look behind us. You can see a tower, and you can see some flags flying on top of that tower. That's Jaffa Gate. That's where we entered into the old city. To my right over here, what we walked through a little bit is the Armenian quarter. We have the Jewish quarter right next to it over here. The Muslim quarter, which expands into that direction. And then if we can just come over here, so I'm going to show you guys something really cool. In between these trees and this fence, you can see the minaret to the left, but you can also see, you can see a minaret to the left. It's a little bit difficult to see, actually, not the one there on the right. Hold on one second. I'm going to take you to another view just over here. Stick with me. Isn't this cool to be up on the rooftops? Literally, there are shops down below us right now. We're on the rooftops here. But just over here, look at this great view. This is the Christian quarter that we're going to be going into. And what you can see now is the large tower to the right. That is a Lutheran church called the Church of the Redeemer. But the two right there, those two domes right there, that is the Church of the Sepulchre, which is like the Holy of Holies for many, many Christians. There's a couple different places that people believe is the place where crucifixion, resurrection in the Christian theology and belief took place. But most Christians believe it was there in the Church of the Sepulchre. We are going to pass by that as well, and we'll go a little bit more in depth. So why do all four quarters meet here, and how did they develop? Well, we know that the Romans destroyed Jerusalem in the year 70 CE. We still commemorate that on the 9th of Av, the Hebrew month Av, which was just a few weeks ago when the temple was destroyed. Well, 70 years later, a Roman emperor by the name of Hadrian will come into Jerusalem, and he destroys the entire city. Not one building is left standing after the wrath of Hadrian. And he will build here a typical Roman city. And every Roman city is going to have two major streets. One is known as the Cardo, and the other one is known as the Decamantus. And this is where the Cardo and the Decamantus meet. This is the major intersection. And in the intersection, they had a temple to their pagan god that they were worshiping here in Jerusalem, which was Venus. That is where the Church of the Sepulchre stands today. That used to be a pagan temple where the Romans worshipped Venus. And I'm going to have Phil come on over here, and I just want you guys to look through this grate, and you can look down below. This is the main shopping area of the Muslim market, the Arab market. We are literally standing on top of it right now. And so these two streets, the Decamantis and the Cardo, which the Cardo is underneath this dome that you can see right now, this is where they met. And so eventually you had the quarters, which will eventually become the Armenian, the Jewish, the Muslim, and the Christian quarter. And they all have their own characteristics that define them. And maybe by the end of this tour, you'll be able to pick up a little bit on that. So I think for most of us, it's obvious why there's a Jewish quarter. This is the eternal spiritual capital of the Jewish people. It's the capital of the state of Israel. You can see we're going into these stone structures. So I hope that, you know, the reception is going to be good. I'm just going to go to the other side and I'll continue talking there. So for most of us, it's obvious why there's a Jewish quarter, right? This is the eternal capital, spiritual capital. It's also the physical capital of the state of Israel today. It's also obvious why there's a Christian quarter, right? The entire premise of Christianity is based on crucifixion and resurrection, which many Christians believe took place right here in Jerusalem. And we understand why there's a Muslim quarter. The Muslims conquered this area and controlled it for almost 1,500 years, from 638, maybe all the way until 1917. I'm gonna wait till we get out of the stone area. So they controlled here from 638 until 1917, at the end of World War I, when the British defeated the Ottoman Empire. And for those 2,000 years, nearly 2,000 years, Jews were always treated as second-class citizens in their own land. It was only when the British defeated the Turkish Empire that Jews were treated equally with their fellow citizens here in Jerusalem. And this was just one giant step forward to what we are all still seeking, the ultimate redemption of Jerusalem and the witnessing of the rebuilding of the Beit HaMikdash, which is Hebrew for our holy temple. So I'm going to put this mask on. Hopefully you guys still be able to hear me just fine, as we're going to get into a little bit of a busy area here. And we're coming down to one of my favorite places to talk about here in the Old City. Again, we're here for only an hour and a half, and I'm trying to cover all four quarters, including the Kotel, which is usually done in an entire day. So bear with me if I'm speaking a little bit fast and trying to get through a lot of information here. Now, this is great. This is amazing. Just look at those two little kids here climbing the rocks down below. What we are looking at right now is the Cardo. And this was built by the Romans, by the Emperor Hadrian. If you guys remember Hadrian, I just mentioned before. He is going to destroy Jerusalem completely. And he builds a Roman city. And every Roman city is going to have this Cardo. Now, I just have to imagine who actually built this Cardo, but Jewish slaves. And how many Jewish slaves died building this Cardo for the Romans? Now, in a Jewish cemetery, you'll see rocks placed on top of graves. It's a little bit of like a marker. There's actually a deep meaning behind that. I'm not going to get into it right now. But on top of these pillars, you can't see it because it's too small, you actually have rocks placed on top. And I lived here in the Old City for a long time. And I've been guiding here for an even longer time. I'm just going to take a little sip of water here. Thank you, Bill. And for the longest time, I thought those stones were in memory of all the Jewish slaves who were killed building this cardo for the Romans. Until one day I saw some kids, like you can see playing on the rocks over there, picking up small little pebbles and throwing them up in the air to see who can get one to land on top of the pillar. And I just began to laugh because I thought to myself, isn't that incredible? Those stones, which I thought represented death, actually represent what? Life. They actually represent life and the return of the Jewish people. But then I thought to myself even further. I had to dig down deep into our scriptures, into the Bible, what we call in Hebrew the Tanakh. And there is an entire segment of the prophets. And there's one prophet by the name of Zechariah. And in his prophecy, God speaks to the Jewish nation. And he says, even though it's unfathomable to you, think about it, it's 2,000 years we were in exile. Even though it's unfathomable to you, there'll come a day that I bring my people, the Jewish people, from all four corners of the world, and I return them to Jerusalem, and you'll see old men with staff in hand and children playing in the streets. And here you are right now, virtually, but one day you'll be here in Jerusalem, I have no doubt about it. You can see the children playing in the streets of Jerusalem, on a street that was built by the Romans, who thought that they defeated us by renaming Jerusalem Ilio Capitolina. For the first time in like over 1,000 years, Jerusalem's not called Jerusalem. They even renamed the land of Israel. They call it Palestine. They call it for the first time Palestinia. They renamed Israel and they call it Palestine after the Philistines, the Plishtim, who are our first temple period enemies. So what is so amazing is when you come here is you get to actually walk on these stones and become a part of that prophecy of the returning, or at least witnessing the returning of the Jewish people to Jerusalem and to the land of Israel. It's just absolutely remarkable to be here and to be able to witness it with your own eyes. Earlier this morning, and I try and produce a lot of content. You guys could see it on my Facebook page. If you haven't liked it, look it up, David Sussman Israel Tours. But this morning, I was in Shiloh. And Shiloh is where the tabernacle, right? Where the Mishkan stood for 369 years. And eventually, it would arrive here with King David, at least the Arona Kodesh, the Ark of the Covenant. It would be his son Solomon who builds the first temple. But it sat in Shiloh for 369 years. And I went to the Shiloh winery today. And hey, Phil, it's not really facing towards me. Towards in the Shiloh winery, and we actually picked grapes. Chardonnay grapes this morning, my wife and I with them, in order to produce wine that will be on your table, hopefully in another 18 months or so. But it was really just an amazing thing to see, you know, and there's a pasuk in the Torah, there's a line in the Bible that says, in the beginning stages of the ultimate redemption, you'll see the land becoming ready for the return of the Jewish people by watching the trees and the vineyards begin to bloom once again. And driving through the Shomron, Samaria, and seeing all the vineyards and the olive trees and the fruit trees that are growing there, it is hard not to see it. You have to be blind not to see it. And even if you're blind, you feel the energy that is just exploding there of the return of the Jewish people in those settlements that you have over there. We are right now in the main square of the Jewish quarter. And I want you to look around at some of the buildings over here because they all look new. Why do these buildings all look new? And that's because between 1948 and 1967, the old city was occupied by Jordan. And they systematically went through the entire Jewish quarter and they destroyed all of the buildings. Now, when we liberated the old city in 1967 and we returned, we didn't just rebuild what was here. We rebuilt something that was bigger, something that was better, something that was stronger. And today you can see how vibrant the Jewish quarter is. You have a beautiful synagogue that was also destroyed in 1948 by the Jordanians, known as the Horva Synagogue, that stood in the center of Yerushalayim. was a focal point for many, many, many decades. And you also have over here a menorah. Come close over here, Phil. You also have a menorah that is actually kosher to be used in the temple when it's rebuilt. 95 pounds of gold was actually used in this menorah. It is an alloy. It's not pure gold like the original menorah, but 95 pounds of gold was used in this, and it has been, certified that this is an acceptable menorah to be used in the temple. And the institute, the organization that built it, known as the Temple Institute, look them up, are building the vessels that are required for the service that will be conducted in the temple when it is rebuilt. Just an awesome sight to see all of these, not even little, but these major steps that are being taken right now to see the complete fulfillment of Jerusalem. And I had just seen this rabbi here, who's a great rabbi, Rabbi Yaakov Klein, but I don't see him anymore. I was going to introduce him. Come with me as we continue to walk through the Jewish quarter on our way to the Kotel. And this is a familiar walk for anybody who's been here. I call it the food court of the old city. If you're here, with a tour group, you're going to come here for lunch on your day in the old city. Get your shawarma, get your falafel, get pizza, whatever you want. This is where you're going to come to eat your food for lunch. Here we have some people having dinner, some shops. I just want to give a little shout out to my beautiful kids, Binyamin and Hannah Kayla, who are home right now with my wife, Melissa, enjoying this virtual tour as well. Just like these families who are here, we came as a family here last week, and there's just something special about seeing your kids. And my kids are 6 years old. I have twins, thank God. And to see them put their hands on the stones of the Western Wall and to offer up their prayers, right, for extra ice cream at dessert, but also the sincerity in the heart when they wish for the well-being of their parents, myself, my wife, Melissa. It was really an amazing experience for all of us. And I want to say thank you to my amazing, beautiful wife who allowed me out this evening and not taking care of the kids at home in order to be here with you and to offer you this virtual tour. As we walk down the stairs here, I want you to see there's a street sign actually on the other side here. You can see they're doing some construction. They're actually building an elevator here, and you can't see the street sign. Okay, that's not a big deal. We're just gonna continue down towards the Western Wall, towards the Kotel. Oh, and already when you take this corner, you can already start to see it open up a little bit there. You can actually see the gray dome of the Al-Aqsa Mosque right there. You can see the oldest active Jewish cemetery in the world. In fact, the oldest active Jewish cemetery in the world, the Mount of Olives. We know where 3 prophets are buried on that mountain. We know where the tomb of Yeshayahu, Isaiah the prophet, was located. It has been desecrated. There is a Muslim village that's built on top of it, known as Silwan. And there's a lot of First Temple period tombs there, and they unfortunately have been desecrated. So we're going to continue down here. Come with me as we continue down towards the Western Wall. And right here, we're going to get a beautiful view. You can see how busy it is over here. We're just going to find ourselves a little spot, and we can do maybe a short explanation up here, overlooking this entire area as the sun is coming down. A better spot there, you think? All right. Look at this. Isn't this great seeing all these families that are here enjoying the Western Wall. Is it good here? You can see it through the bars? Oh, maybe, yeah. There you go. Go in it. There you go. Perfecto. Got a great cameraman here, Phil. Phil, thank you so much. But you can see the beautiful Dome of the Rock, exactly where the temple is going to be rebuilt. In fact, the Dome of the Rock, it's been protecting that place for the last 1,300 years, right for the time that we merit it. And even though when you look at the Western Wall and it looks so big, it really is only a tenth of the size of the entire length of the Western Wall. The Western Wall actually runs 1,500 feet, and it's 1,000 feet wide. It was the largest platform that we know of ever built by mankind. 2,000 years ago, King Herod built this platform in order to elevate the entire area to accommodate the hundreds of thousands of pilgrims during the major festivals, the Jewish festivals, Passover, Pesach, Shavuot, which is known as Pentecost as well, and Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles, when Jews are commanded to come up to Jerusalem. In order to accommodate the hundreds of thousands of pilgrims, he built this artificial platform, on a mountain peak. So he turned a mountain into a platform here in Jerusalem. It was 1,500 feet long and 1,000 feet wide, the largest platform ever built by mankind to this day. So come with me as we continue down. I want to actually show you the hotel itself. We have to go through a little bit of a security check. Not such a big deal, right? Sort of like when you go to the airport, you got to go through the metal detector. So we're going to have to go through a little bit of a metal detector as well. Unfortunately, we live in these times where we really need to protect ourselves. Come on, Phil. All right, here, I'll take it. There, you can just see. That's my cameraman having to come through, take off his backpack. He's got to throw it through the X-ray machine over here. All the people coming down to the West Wall, to the hotel. Out comes the bag, and everybody's happy, safe, and secure down here at the Western Wall. Hey, a nice thumbs up. Who do we got here? Melinda Stein from Savannah, Georgia. Great to see you. I guided the Stein family from Savannah. What was it now? Was it last year? Last summer? My gosh, it's 13 months now. Melinda, give me a thumbs up if you can hear me fine. I see you're enjoying your dinner. Jacqueline, can you hear me fine? Hanover, yeah? I can't hear you. Give me a thumbs up. Yeah? All right. Okay, I see it now. Thank you. Great. Wow, it's so busy here. Unbelievable. It has not been this busy in a very, very long time. For those of you who joined me on the Tisha B'Av tour a few weeks ago, you remember that when we came down here, it was basically empty. I have not seen it this full since pre-corona days. And you can see they expanded the prayer section, which is usually closer to the wall, all the way out here, and they section it off. And they only allow a certain amount of people inside that area to make sure that that everybody is social distancing in that place. And here, Phil, let's just take a look. I don't think we're gonna make it all the way down because this line, you know, it's Disney World for us spiritual people. You can see this big long line over here. That's probably about a half hour to get down. So what I'm gonna do is I'm trying to get as close as possible. And I'm just gonna share a little story with you. I guide all different types of people. And I tell people all the time, and sometimes people come, some people, they're telling me not to film right here. Some people say that, you know, they come here and they don't feel anything. They don't understand. People are weeping. People are crying. And I say, you know what? God forbid you want to take God out of the equation. Take God out of the equation. Everybody realizes that there is a science, say quantum physics, that E equals MC squared, that everything is energy. We're all balls of energy radiating in different vibrations. And when are we radiating the strongest is when we're being sincere, when we're being vulnerable, when we're being authentic. That's why our spouses always asking us to be a little bit more vulnerable. And when are we the most vulnerable is in prayer. Look at all these people praying in front of us right now, pouring out their hearts, right? Their minds and their souls, crying out to God for a number of different things. All that energy is being absorbed into those stones. So for us Jews who know, without a doubt, the last 2,000 years, our families have been praying towards Jerusalem. All of that energy has been absorbed into those stones. And so when we come here, we place our hands upon those stones, we're not just touching 2,000-year-old stone, we're actually touching the energy of our grandparents and our great-grandparents and our great-great-grandparents and our great-great, all the generations for 2,000 years that have been absorbed into those stones. But the best part about it is that we get to leave our energy on those stones for future generations to feel us. You know, I always ask this question, how many of you can name your great-grandparents? You had 8 of them. How many of you can name your great-grandparents? Most of us can't, which means in 4 generations, most of us are forgotten. The only thing that's remembered is the values that we pass on, the morals that we pass on to our children. And if we do a good enough job, they're going to pass it on to our grandchildren, who will pass it on to our great-grandchildren, to our great-grandchildren, so that they can be here too one day, hopefully, when the Beit HaMikdash will already be, the temple will already be rebuilt at that time. And so I'm going to offer a little prayer for all of you who have tuned in right now, that you should all have a long, successful, beautiful life, that your children should bring you nothing but joy and happiness, and that during this terrible pandemic, that all of our families should be healthy, safe, and happy. And especially for all of you who've helped me out, again, supporting me in this time. Tourism is just completely flat, and you know, these virtual tours and through my Patreon site. I know some of you have subscribed to my Patreon site. I had a television show for 4 seasons that was aired on a network known as Daystar. And I have it all on my Patreon site. I'll send you a link to that as well if anybody wants to subscribe. And of course, if anybody wants to support this great content, you're more than happy, more than welcome to leave a tip on my PayPal account. I'll give you that information as well. We are going to be going through this tunnel. I'm hoping, and this is going to take us into the Muslim quarter, I'm hoping that we're not going to lose reception. So Phil, fast as you can all the way down to the other side, and I'll meet you there in just a minute. Here you can see some of the amazing maneuvering. All right, this is taking the trash out of the old city. Not an easy task. And you're going to see it's just going to go right on up these stairs. But that's the way it's done here. Here, look at this restaurant here. All right, the names have changed now. We're in the Muslim quarter. In the Jewish quarter, you have like the Jewish Quarter Cafe, right? Here, Al-Barak, right? Barak, that was the name of that mythical beast it's talked about before that took Muhammad in the oral tradition known as the night journey. So you guys can probably hear the sounds of the Muslim quarter. This is the call to prayer. 5 times a day, the Muslims pray. And so you can hear the call to prayer here. Lots of different sounds, lots of different people living here in Jerusalem, side by side. Now, I'm just gonna have Phil just look down this hallway here. Get me in the shot if you can. This is known as the cotton market, because this is where they used to sell the cotton 1,000 years ago. This was all built by the Crusaders. So this is roughly about 1,000 years old, but it leads right on to the Temple Mount. It leads right on to the Temple Mount. This is one of the access points onto the place where the temple stood, where the Dome of the Rock is, and where the Al-Aqsa Mosque is located. However, non-Muslims are not allowed to go through this entrance. They're only allowed through one entrance, which is on the southern side of the western wall, and only during particular times, because right now the Temple Mount, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the Dome of the Rock is run, or it's governed by what is known as the Waqf, which is the Muslim Council. So straight through there, though, you do have a view of the Temple Mount, which is really cool. The street we're on is called Haggai, the Valley Street. The bedrock is really probably about 30 feet below us. The entire Muslim quarter here is artificially elevated on arches that was built about 600 years ago. Bill, over here. It was built about 600 years ago in order to elevate the Muslim quarter to be at the same level as the Temple Mount, so that they wouldn't have to walk down the hill and then up and walk down the hill. However, this particular street here, until 1929, in the mid-1800s, with the Jewish population, it was booming. This was mostly Jewish. This was actually part of the Jewish quarter. And you can actually see on the door frames of many places, you can still see where the mezuzah was, right? Come nice close there. You can see there used to be a mezuzah here. Of course, it's been broken. It's been removed, as many of the different doorposts that you'll see in this section. Why 1929? Well, in 1929, there were riots that took place across Israel. The Arab population rioted against the Jewish population. And many of the Jews who lived here, because this was sort of on the border, felt very unsafe, and they retreated into what then would become, solely the Jewish quarter. And then in 1948, unfortunately, all the Jews were forced out of the old city between 1948 and 1967, but not just Jerusalem, all of our holy cities, right? Hebron, Shem, right, which Arabs call Nablus, Shiloh, where I was at today. In fact, the entire area, which we refer to as the West Bank, so that entire area, and this term is used almost too frequently that it just doesn't, have that it doesn't give us that feeling that really should, but it was completely ethnically cleansed of Jews. In 1948, when we lost that terrain to the Jordanians. Unlike here in Israel, right? Here in Israel, all the Arabs who were living in the land of Israel got citizenship. The Jews who were living in the area that became Jordan were forcibly thrown out until 1967, when we were able to liberate not just the old city of Jerusalem, but our other holy cities as well: Bethlehem, Shiloh, Hebron, Shem, and the entire area of Judea and Samaria. So here we are, continuing to walk through the Muslim quarter. You can just see totally a different scene than what we've already seen in the Armenian quarter and in the Jewish quarter. This is a major intersection, because you can see there's some officers here keeping the peace. There's another entrance to the Temple Mount down this way, but we're going to head up this way towards the quarter. So we're going to be leaving the Muslim quarter. Again, a lot of arches, lots of stone. Hopefully we'll be able to keep all of our reception. All right. You got me? Great. So let's just continue up this hill. In Jerusalem, we have a saying: what goes down must go up. And here we are ascending from the valley streets to the Christian Quarter. And I'm just gonna stop here for a second because you have some really interesting architecture, some beautiful architecture here that is easily noticed because it has the style of red, white, red, white, red, white. The red stone is a very, very expensive stone that is quarried here in Jerusalem. It's a type of Jerusalem stone, as well as the limestone, which is the white stone. But the white stone is a little bit less expensive. And all of this architecture was built during a period known as the Mamluk period. The Mamluks were a dynasty ruling from Cairo. Again, the land of Israel. And people have joined me in other tours. I apologize for repeating this, but it's so important to realize is that the land of Israel has not been independent since the destruction of the Second Temple in the year 70 CE until 1948. It was always governed by foreign empires. One of those foreign empires were the Mamluks. And the Mamluks had a very unique style of architecture, and we're seeing it right here. And this is all between 6, 7, maybe even 800 years old, some of this Mamluk architecture. How cool is that, especially for our American friends? When we see a building that's 200 years old, we're like, this is amazing. This is 800 years old. Mamluk architecture, a dynasty that ruled the land of Israel for probably about 300 years, from 1267 until 1517, when the Turkish Empire, the Ottoman Empire, took over and ruled the land of Israel for exactly 400 years, between 1517 and 1917. You guys remember in the beginning at Jaffa Gate, I pointed out the citadel, right? The stronghold of Jerusalem, which was King Herod's palace at one time. So that is where the official surrender of Jerusalem took place. The Turkish Empire surrendering it to the British Empire. Again, constantly, you have various foreign empires ruling the land of Israel until finally the Jewish people threw off the yoke of foreign oppression, of foreign rule here in the land of Israel, and we're able to liberate our land and ourselves through it. It's really important to realize that. We're able to liberate ourselves as well, knowing that no longer are we the wandering Jew. No longer are we the Jew that was forced out from one country to another, to another, to another, but that we returned home and with the ability to defend ourselves. You got me, Phil? You hear me? Not so well. Okay. So we're just going to continue walking through the streets. This is a local marketplace. You know, in the old city, a lot of the shops are geared towards tourists. This area, it's closed already because it's the evening. But this is the mall of Jerusalem. Oh. All right, that's fine. All right. Here we go. Can you hear me, Phil? I'm talking. Mic check. Wonderful. So we're in an area that we didn't have such great reception. It was a marketplace that was not geared towards tourists, right? Most of the markets here in the old city are geared towards tourists. That one was for the local Arab population living in East Jerusalem, living here in the old city, where people can shop for toys for their kids, clothing, school material for the local population, but most of it was closed. This is a touristy area, and it's been closed now for months because, like we said, there's no tourists. And you can see now it's much more open here. It feels good. There's no crowd, and that's because we're in the Christian quarter right now. That's the Church of the Redeemer. Over here, we saw it from the rooftop, that big white tower that was a Lutheran church, one of the two churches built by Prussia, by Germany in the 1800s. The other one was Dormition Abbey, which is where many Christians believe that the mother of Jesus, Mary, was laid to rest and then would be assumed into heaven. You can just look down this alleyway over here. You have a beautiful fountain. There is, I believe it's a Greek Orthodox church in the background. You can see the pretty lights, and usually this is just filled with people, even in the evening, as people are eating and shopping and just enjoying the beautiful, cool evening air here in Jerusalem. Now I realize that we are almost approaching the hour-and-a-half mark, but we've arrived to an important place. You can see the sign, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, right? It's closed right now. And there is some construction going on, so it's a bit noisy. But I'll give a little bit of the history. So the Church of the Sepulchre, as I mentioned before, the stones that I'm standing on down here were some of the original stones from the pagan temple that was here before Helena, the mother of Constantine, came and built the church here to commemorate the location where she believed that the crucifixion and resurrection took place. Now, the original church that was built 1700 years ago was almost completely destroyed by a Muslim ruler, again from Cairo, but not the Mamluks, by a Muslim ruler named Al-Hakim, who was part of the Fatimid dynasty during the early Arab period here, who came in 1009 and destroyed all of the churches in the land of Israel. Because in Islam, they look at Christianity as being a pagan religion. And so he wiped out all these pagan churches from the land of Israel. And many Muslims in Egypt at that time hailed him as being the Muslim Messiah. However, a lot of people said, no, he did not fit the criteria. And so they said, fine, if he's not the Messiah, he's a prophet. There's only one problem with that. In Islam, it says there shall be no other prophet after Muhammad. So you have a break-off religion from Islam known as the Druze people, D-R-U-Z-E. And you have a lot of Druzy people living here in Israel. And this was the beginning of the Druze faith from Al-Hakim in 1009. It's also the reason for the Crusades. The church was destroyed. They wanted to come and redeem the Holy Land and to rebuild the Church of the Sepulchre, which they did. And anybody who's been to Europe and has seen some of the, Middle Age Gothic style churches and cathedrals throughout Europe will recognize some of the architecture, because this is typical Crusader architecture. Come here, the door's open. I'll give you guys like a little sneak peek. We're not going to be able to go inside the church because first of all, there'll be zero reception and the door's closing anyway. So go hurry up, up. Okay, never mind. Anyhow, for many Christians, as I said, the Church of the Sepulchre is the Holy of Holies, and a lot of Christian pilgrims come here, during better times in order to connect to their faith, and hopefully, like all religions try and do, better ourselves through it, to remind ourselves that as human beings, we are driven not only by that animal aspect of who we are, but also the fact that we have a soul, that we have a neshama. Come with us as we come up here. Can you hear me? Nothing? Let me see here. Oh my gosh, my eyes. Who is that? Claire? Claire, give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. All right, awesome. You can hear me. My cameraman slash sound man was a little worried. You can see it's starting to get dark. The sun is setting, and we are making our way back to Jaffa Gate, where we started. We've now gone through the Armenian quarter, the Jewish quarter, the Kotel, a little bit of a couple of thumbs up. Thank God. Okay. Again, I apologize about the reception here. You know, this is all Crusader architecture, 1,000 years old, and they weren't so considerate to us future people on our cell phone reception. But what I want is that were discovered as we're redoing the sewer system here in the old city. Hi, can you hear me? Thumbs up if you guys can hear me. Can you hear me? Couple thumbs up. You got some thumbs up? No? All right, good. So it was discovered, and the stones dated back to the Second Temple period. So here, by the Church of the Sepulchre, for Christian pilgrims who are coming here to be able to walk on those stones, which if you believe that Jesus was here at that time, he probably walked on those stones. So very, very, meaningful and powerful experience for people of the Christian faith coming here to Jerusalem to be able to walk on those stones. So the marketplace on the rooftop. All right. Sorry, guys. An hour and a half walking through here, but this at the beginning of the tour, either are a lot of people who are leaving. So I hope thumbs up from anybody if you guys can hear me. I'm not seeing anybody. Give me a can you hear me? Thumbs up, somebody, if you can hear me. All right, good, good. All right. Here we are. Look at where we are, guys. Almost exactly where we started off an hour and a half ago. That is Jaffa Gate right there. We can't see you. Okay. I don't know why here, Phil. Guys, this is the end of the tour anyhow. A little bit of a technical difficulty here towards the end. I understand you can't see me, but you can hear me. I just want to say thank you for tuning in. Thank you for subscribing. I hope to be able to deliver a lot more great content for you. I will send you a recording of this tour that I will edit, speed through some parts, and also add some other pictures. And if anybody wants to sponsor a future tour, I would love to give you guys a virtual tour of Caesarea, the holy city of Sfat, to go up to the Golan Heights, to Tel Aviv, to other areas here in Jerusalem, to Yad Vashem. So many places that you can visit here that we can do virtually, but I can't do it without your assistance. So please email, let me know if you want to sponsor to dedicate one of these virtual tours. And I'll also send you out my PayPal link if anybody wants to give me a tip for this tour. It would be greatly, greatly appreciated on behalf of myself. It'll be available later. Phil just told me that there was a question. It'll be available later. I'm going to email you guys that information out. And you can hit that link, and God bless all of you. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll keep you posted for our next virtual tour. Thank you once again to our sponsor, Jerusalem Sunrise Cycling. And also, again, I'm giving a shout out to Chris and Gloria in Portland and to everybody else who were gracious and gave me a tip for the last virtual tour. Thank you, and God bless you. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.